Today we are here with Arts Learning Lab, and this is a webinar series for arts administrators and educators in Idaho. We do feature quarterly sessions with expert presenters discussing topics that are relevant to your communities. This is a part of the Idaho Commission on the Arts programming. The Idaho Commission on the Arts is a state agency under the Office of the Governor, and its mission is to enable access to the arts, arts education, and the cultural and artistic heritage. So thank you so much for joining us today. This session is being recorded, and we will be sharing this video afterwards on our website as well as on YouTube. So make sure you subscribe to that or follow it so that you can have this for future reference. But thank you so much for joining us. We are looking to accomplish a few outcomes today. The first one is really learning how to use financial management tools to communicate the story of your organization. Then we're also looking to kind of empower you and have you leave inspired and curious about learning how to use these numbers to lead your organizations. Moving away from maybe that sense of unknown or even fear of financial management and moving into a space of curiosity and learning. And also recognizing our third outcome that we're looking to accomplish today is for you all to identify resources to enhance your understanding and knowledge of financial management. So those are our big goals for today. To help with the conversation, I would love to ask all of our participants joining us, if you could open up that chat right now and share in the chat the top 3 concerns or 3 topics regarding financial management that you would really love help with or more information on. We have some fantastic experts today, and they are really great at reviewing what you're looking for and then being able to respond in real time today with things that you might have questions about. So if you can open up that chat again, that bottom controls, click on chat, and then make sure you're typing to everybody, and you'll be able to share in the chat the top 3 things that you're concerned about. So while you're writing about that, I'll just briefly go over our agenda today, just so you have an idea of how we're going to be going. Obviously, we're doing this fantastic little introduction, but then we're going to jump into the good stuff. We're going to start with Jerica actually presenting about arts finance consulting presentation, and then we'll pass it along to Marie. So flip-flop that first and second there. And then we'll make sure at the end, we'll have some time for you to be able to answer some of your questions. So you can also write your questions in the chat for our presenters throughout today. We'll be collecting those to ask them out loud to our presenters towards the end. But also if you're writing them in the chat, then if Marie or Jerica see them while they're presenting or talking, they might be able to present and respond to that in real time. So make sure you utilize that chat there for you. And then at the end, right before we close up for the day, we are going to be popping up a quick poll. It's 2 questions. Before you leave us today, if you could make sure to take a minute to fill out and respond to that poll, that would be really fantastic. It helps us make sure that the stuff that we're talking about on these Arts Learning Lab series is relevant to you. So now that we went through all of that, I do want to pass this off to the highlight of the hour, our presenters. And I want to introduce you to our first presenter, Jerica Sinyak. She is a coach and a consultant for the Arts Finance Consulting organization located in Northern California. And Jerica, would you like to take it away and introduce yourself to our folks joining us today?
Sure thing. Thank you so much, Allison. I'm so thrilled to be here today. My name is Jerica Senyak. For those of you without video on, I'm a mid-30s woman with long dark hair, long dangly earrings, a black shirt in a room full of plants. I'm afraid I'm a little bit backlit today, but hopefully you won't really be looking at my face as much as you'll be looking at the slides. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. I'm going to try and run through these slides as rapidly as I can, mostly just because we really want to get to the time for you to go through your own questions as much as possible. I also want to highlight that both Marie and I are very excited to continue this conversation down the line. And so if there's anything that we don't have time to do, this will be reiterated throughout the conversation, but you can can always reach out to us after the fact to deepen any information on the topics that we go over today. The slides will also be available for you as a PDF, and the presentation that I'm about to share, I've tried to design as much as possible to really encapsulate information for you to refer back to, right? So that the things that I really want to touch on, hopefully this will be something where if you need to remember something that was said, there'll be some handy eye-catching slides for you to jog your memory. So without further ado, what we're really going to be talking about today is the idea of numbers as narratives, right? So much of the arts is about storytelling, right? It's about who we're serving. It's about the stories of our communities. It's about the stories of ourselves. And numbers and financials are really just another way of telling the stories that are key to the work that we do as artists. So to begin with, just a little bit about me and my own background. My name is Jerica Seniak. I use she, her pronouns. I'm an arts finance consultant. I do consulting work for artists, arts organizations, fiscally sponsored projects, collective. I specialize in financial empowerment for arts and cultural workers specifically. And I work with people at a huge range of sizes. I have touched everything from $10 million organizations to individual artists running $100 a month Patreon. What I really want to begin with today is defining financial empowerment. So we talk about financial literacy within the arts. And, financial literacy is a great, great term to talk about the concept of familiarity with financial concepts. But I really love the words financial empowerment to take us to the next step. Anybody who is running an organization or working in the arts is literate in making that project go. If you have kept something alive for a year, you are building your financial literacy. And so I define financial empowerment as one layer above that, which is the ability to keep track of, talk clearly about numbers in a way that supports your vital work. Numbers are a form of narrative. That's really what we're here to say. We're going to touch on some key storytelling tools today, right? So if we're talking about narrative, how do we tell stories with numbers? That's really what finance is fundamentally about. The first tool that we use is your budget, which is the tool that tells the story of where you're trying to go as an organization, as a collective, as an individual. Your financial tracking system, where you actually keep the data of day-to-day transactions, is the story of what's happening right now. Your profit and loss statement is the story of what happened in the past. Once you have kept track of it, what actually happened. And finally, we'll touch on a couple of other common forms like the balance sheet and the IRS Form 990. But in addition to reviewing these common financial tools, my real goal, and Marie shares this goal with me, I know, is to help you get curious about finance as narrative. In the arts, often as in life, people bring a lot of shame, anxiety, frustration to the need to do finance, to the frustrations and the limitations of the tools available to us as artists. We want to try and shift the mindset from being finance as major source of stress to finance as the story of what we're trying to do, where we're trying to go, and why you should give money to my amazing project because it does something incredible. I want to start with a tip for all of you. Good financial tools should make your work feel easier, not harder. How many people here with us today have experienced using some financial tool, whether it's a budget, QuickBooks, some kind of financial tracker, a report that made you feel miserable or frustrated or confused? In the chat, just drop me a yes if that has ever been your experience. Nobody? Wow, that's amazing. Okay, that's very unusual. Oh no, okay, say a yes. At least one. Tools that are, finance is really there to make your life easier, right? It can feel like a chore that we have to do to satisfy requirements, but at the end of the day, finance is about increasing our capacity to do the work we want to do. If you have tools that are making your life feel harder, it's probably a problem with the tools and not a problem with you. One of the big takeaways for us is if you are experiencing frustration or stress around finance, that is a good pointer to the fact that your tools aren't serving you well, rather than a pointer to the fact that you don't understand, or you're an idiot, or you just don't get finance, or you're just an artist and you don't know how money works. I want to start by talking about budgets today because budgets are really the core organizational tools. As an organization, you get asked for a lot of financial reports, but the thing that you are going to use and depend on the most is going to be your budget. Budgets are future and goal oriented, right? A budget tells the story of what it is you want, intend, and plan to do. Your budget should be a mix of vision and reality, right? Every budget is full of unknowns. I often get people coming to me in workshops saying, I don't even know where to begin with my budget. I feel like I'm just making it up. Every budget is a little bit of invention, but every budget is also a mixture of the things you already know, right? That you know what your rent is going to be this year. You know how much you have in the bank, whatever it might be, and a mixture of your vision. Where do you want to go? What are you hoping will happen? Budgets are guides for decision making, right? At the end of the day, when you're trying to figure out, can we do this big production? Your budget is the tool that allows you to see how much money you have available to spend on performers. It's the thing that allows you to say, okay, we can get into 10 classrooms this year, but probably not 100, right? So budgets are the tools that you use to decide what it is that you're trying to do, and in a pinch, what the best choices are available to you. Budgets are representative of your values. If you're an organization that says you value paying artists, your budget should reflect a lot of money paid to artists. If your organization values big, splashy, beautiful theatrical shows, there should be a lot of money in your budget for costumes. If you value teaching and education, there should be a line item for teachers in there, right? What's in your budget is a statement of what it is that you are trying to accomplish. Budgets are always a little bit wrong. There's often a perception that budgets should be reflective of exact reality, that they're kind of rules for spending, but that's not the case, right? Budgets, because they are future oriented, always take into account the fact that we don't actually know what's going to happen. And finally, they really are the key organizational document, right? They are the spine of the body of the organization. What budgets should not be are exact. You cannot have an exact budget. If you are dollar for dollar matching exactly your budget, something funny is going on. Either you have the gift of prophecy, which is unusual, or you're updating your budget every 5 minutes to match reality. Here's a big one. Budget should not be net zero. There's a common perception in the nonprofit space that nonprofit means you can't make any money. This is not true. Nonprofit means that if you make more money than you spend, you cannot simply pay that out as dividends to your shareholders. It needs to be reinvested in the organization. That doesn't mean you need to reinvest it today. You can hold on to that cash and spend it down the line. Budgets should be made in order to bring in more than you spent. You want to be saving for a rainy day. You don't want to be spending every penny because you never know if something's going to happen. Maybe a pandemic will hit and you won't have any ticket sales anymore. Maybe you'll lose a key organizational person and have to hire somebody who costs twice as much. Maybe you want to buy a building someday, right? Not net zero budgeting allows you to plan for a more robust and flexible future. But it should not be over ambitious, right? You want to be realistic. Don't put in a number that is totally pie in the sky because you're going to be disappointed down the line. At the same time, a budget just shouldn't be set in stone, right? Just because you put a number in doesn't mean it can't be changed, that it isn't flexible, that it's not subject to alteration. That being said, don't always shift your budget around, right? A good time to revisit your budget might be every 6 months. If you've experienced a really big change in expectations from the time you first made your budget, maybe do a budget revision. But don't try to constantly update your budget to match reality because the value of a budget is trying to say, what is it we want to do? And then comparing it to what happened so that you can see the gaps and discrepancies between them and use that to tell your story better. If you budgeted for a $100,000 grant and you only got a $50,000 grant, if you update your budget to just say $50,000, what that means is that later on, when you're comparing the plan to the reality, you might forget to account for the fact that you were overambitious and that you scale that down. Or the reverse might be true. Finally, I hope I don't have to say this, but a budget should not be intentionally misrepresentative, right? It's a bad idea to make a budget in order to get something that you can only get by telling a white lie or an outright lie, right? Contemplate if you find yourself intentionally wanting to misrepresent something you know to be true, why that is and what it will cost you down the line to make the adjustment for the fact that that's not what's really going on. Maybe there's a grant that you want to get, but you kind of have to tell a little bit of a lie in your budget to get that grant. That grant may well not be worth it to you, either because it is beyond the scope of what you can manage, because you are going to have to set aside other programs in order to make it work, because you're going to end up in a bad financial position because it doesn't cover the admin costs of the program that you're trying to claim you're going to achieve. Whatever it is, budgets should tell as much of the truth as you can tell, and that's true for your financials generally. A key tip here is to find a budget format that meets your needs. If you are a performing arts organization, your budget should include lines for performers. If you are an educational organization, it should have education expenses. If you run a theater, theater rent should be in there. Conversely, if you are an organization that is, say, a collective of watercolor artists, you probably do not need a budget that involves huge salary lines. If your budget format doesn't reflect the reality on the ground for your organization, it's going to be a real struggle to clarify your hopes and goals because the format of the story doesn't match the content. Your financial tracking system documents actual reality as it happens. Financial tracking systems might include spreadsheets, accounting software like Quicken or QuickBooks, secure document storage of some kind, hopefully. Yours should be set up for your specific needs. If you are a multi-million-dollar organization, a spreadsheet is probably not the right tool for you. If you're a $10,000 organization, you probably don't need to be paying for Sage Intacct. Your system should be easy to put data into, right? It should not be a headache to do your data entry. If you are having a headache, if it's really difficult to get the data in, that's a good indicator that your system is not ideally set up for your needs. Similarly, it should be easy to get reports out of. What reports do you need? Are you an organization that needs complex, detailed reporting? Your financial tracking system should be set up to support that. If, on the other hand, you're a small organization that really doesn't need to do anything but a few grant reports now and then, a spreadsheet is probably sufficient for your needs. Your tool should not seem hideously expensive. If you feel as if you are paying too much for your system, that may be an indicator that your system is overpowered for where you are. For example, QuickBooks Online Advanced costs $250 a month. Any small organization probably does not need a $250 a month solution, right? If you're a $15,000 organization, spending $2,500 or more a year on accounting systems is not a good use of your funds. On the other hand, if you're a $10 million organization, spending a few $1,000s a year on accounting is negligible. Finally, your document storage should be secure, just as your accounting system should be secure. Don't put W-9s in an unsecured Google Drive folder that anybody who happens to come across the link can access, right? Bear in mind that sensitive data is included in these systems. Make sure that your system, even if it's just a spreadsheet, is set up in such a way that it can't be accessed by people who should not be touching the sensitive numbers contained in that system. Overall, your ideal financial tracking system should be not miserable to use. If you hate using it, if it feels like a pain in the butt to put data into it, it's probably not the right fit for you. On the other hand, it should be robust enough to meet all your needs, right? So you don't want a system that is so bare bones that you're constantly having to struggle to get it to produce the data that you want. Here's a key tip. This is commonly overlooked. Your financial tracking system should match your budget format. This might seem like a no-brainer to some people, especially if you do something like keep your budget in your accounting system like QuickBooks. There's real advantages to having a budget that lives outside of your accounting system because it's usually a place, if you have something like a spreadsheet budget, you can usually have a lot more detail, a lot more information about what's going into that budget, the decisions that were made, the assumptions that were made, than if you just shove it into your accounting system with no notes and just leave it at that. But if you have a budget that is not contained within your financial tracking system, they should match. Otherwise, when you spit a report out of your financial tracker and you try and compare it to your budget to see how they go together, how you're doing against expectations, you have to do a colossal amount of manual labor to make them match, right? If you have 15 salary categories in your budget and only one in your financial tracking system, it's going to be really hard for you to know if you are doing exactly the way you expected on your salary lines or not. Financial reporting. These are really common storytelling tools that get talked about a lot, but rarely broken down. Financial reports are really about telling the story of what happened and where you're at now. The profit and loss report is the most common one. It's the one that's usually laid side by side to the budget. The profit and loss simply shows income and expense between date A and date B. Did you get in grants? Did you get in donations? Did you get in earned income between January 1st and December 31st? This month, whatever it might be? What kind of expenses did you have? What's the bottom line? That's what the profit and loss really shows. It tells the story of what your money actually did. Did you pay artists? Did you get grants? Did you pay for rent? Did you pay for supplies? It says where your money is going, which tells the story of the activity that you had. What it does not tell you is how much money you actually have right now, right? If you start with $10,000 in your bank account, and this year you bring in $100,000 and you spend $50,000, it doesn't tell you at the end of the year, the profit and loss, which says $50,000 net, does not tell you anything about that beginning balance or about your ending balance. It's also called the actuals. So when people talk about the budget to actuals, they're talking about comparing the budget to the profit and loss. Sometimes it's called the income statement, and sometimes it's called the statement of activity because it shows the activity of the organization in a given period. The balance sheet, conversely, shows your financial situation in a given moment. It's a snapshot of your cash balances, your assets, the money that you might owe, your restricted grant balances, and so on and so forth. It tells the story of where you're at, how much money you actually have available. Unlike the profit and loss, which shows what you got in and what you spent, the balance sheet says, what do you have now? It is the hardest financial document to understand. Many of us have been faced with balance sheets and there's just numbers and words on there that just don't make any sense, right? What's deferred revenue? Maybe you know, maybe you don't know. Maybe there's a number in there that doesn't make any sense. Accounts receivable, maybe you have 17 kinds of fixed assets. What's depreciation? Most people don't really grasp balance sheet because it's very poorly explained. Sometimes it's not explained at all. Even for-profit organizations have a hard time understanding what is on the balance sheet and making sure that it's really accurate. So if you're struggling with the balance sheet or making sense of it, you're not alone. Finally, it requires what's called accrual basis accounting to make a balance sheet. And we can talk about what that is more later if there are questions about that. But fundamentally, nonprofit organizations that have 501c3 status should always be on accrual basis, even if you aren't really doing a ton with it throughout the year. Because if you are not on accrual basis, you can't really represent your cash position accurately on the balance sheet. And it's incredibly helpful to be able to do so. It really helps you advocate for your needs in a way that you cannot do. It's also called the statement of financial position. You may hear it referred to that way as well. Here's a really important tip. Practice, please, reviewing, asking questions about your financial reports, right? If somebody gives you a financial report, if you get a financial report out of your system, please, please, please don't just glance at it, feel overwhelmed and say, sure, I think. Ask questions. If you don't understand it, who can you ask? Does your board know? Does your accountant know? If none of them know, is there a consultant you know? Is there a CPA who can help you? Your financial reports should make sense to you. If they don't make sense to you, they can't help you. If they don't make sense to you, it's probably not something that you did wrong as much as it is, again, a failure of the overall system to support your needs. Get comfortable being confused. You aren't failing if you need help parsing your reports. And anyone who feels stupid for not natively understanding your reporting is not serving you or your organization's needs.
Thank you, Jerica. This is so fantastic. I know you're almost done. We're going to need to pass it off to Marie in just maybe another minute or so.
Great.
But I think you're pretty close to wrapping up.
I am very close to done.
Fantastic.
Just to reiterate the financial planning process here, right? You create your budget with the best info available to you. You track what actually happens. You compare what actually happened to your budget, and then you create a new and improved budget. That's really it. It's all about iteration. It's all about understanding what happened and telling your new story, right? Narrative recap. Future orientation is the budget, where you're trying to go. Present is your financial tracker, what's happening right now. That's also what the balance sheet is for. And finally, the past is the profit and loss, which is the story of what actually happened. The IRS 990 as an asterisk is also a form of the profit and loss that really is not very helpful for most organizations because it's the same boilerplate template for every organization in the US. Doesn't have the level of detail that your internal reports are going to have. At the end of the day, knowledge equals power, right? That's really what we're here to share with you. Financial documents are here to give you the knowledge that you need to feel empowered. It's all about knowing what numbers are telling. What we want is for you to bring your curiosity to those numbers, not your judgment, not your anxiety, as much as possible, putting those things aside and asking, how can I advocate for the work that I do through my numbers? Your numbers are here to work for you, to empower the amazing work that you do as an arts organization or an arts and cultural worker. That's a ton, everyone. I know I just threw that all at you. I'm going to pass it over to Marie, who is going to build off what I said, and then I'm hoping that we'll have some time for questions in there.
Yes. And please make sure if you do have questions that you type those in the chat for Jerica and for Marie. But Marie, go for it.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Marie Baker. I kind of laughed when they were saying their age. I am in the 60 age category, wearing a very short light brown hair. I have glasses on, and I am wearing a beige jacket, and I have earrings. So what I am excited about as we mention this, let me tell you who I work for. I work for the Small Business Development Center. We are an agency that's across the nation. There are some in every state. We typically work with for-profit agencies. But the reason Allison asked me to be on there is I want you to feel comfortable that even for-profit entrepreneurs have issues with financials. It's a challenge. But I've also been, well, I'm currently actually chair of a nonprofit board, but I've been on nonprofit boards, but I also have been an executive director of a very large nonprofit agency and ran multiple grants. So I really come at this with lots of experience, because that's what happens when you get into the 60s, I guess. There's lots of experience that goes along. But I think what I want to reiterate, what Jerica said, is be curious. I know some of you, I don't know how many of you are in the director position or on the board position. In fact, maybe in the chat, if you could tell us who's on the board, who's the executive, that would be fabulous, just so we know the audience, because there is a role. I cannot tell you, I am a numbers person, how many times I've presented or been presented financial statements that no one else asked the question. No one asked the question. And, you know, and I thought, oh, this is frightening, because as board members, you're responsible for that organization. And that's, you know, you're accountable, as well as the executive director. I see that we've got staff, we have employees, we have board. Okay, perfect. This is great. And the treasurer, there you go. I love that position. Anyway, I think the thing that I want to share with you, and a lot of you asked some questions, so I'm going to, Derek and I, we talked about this and we got so excited. I think the key thing is, I'm framing this, can you tell, in my brain right now? It's, someone asked, how do you have financial transparency? And I'm really not sure what that question means, one of the things that Jerica alluded to, you have to be really have courageous conversations with your board and your staff about exactly what is the truth. That is financial transparency. Now, I really believe someone asked also, what's a spreadsheet, a simple template? It depends on the size of your organization, but I will tell you, you literally do need a system such as QuickBooks. There are multiple ones out there. And the cheapest, the least expensive, QuickBooks, I think you can get for $15 a month for the first 6 months or 3 months. Then after that, it's $30. So that's what, $360 a year. It will save you time, energy, and effort because you can key in. I'm not sure if that one you can key in the budgets. You need a little bit more expensive model, but you can still do what Jerica talked about, create that budget, create your chart of accounts the same way, and really be honest with yourself about where you are. There are some transparencies, I mean, some templates for sure, but you're going to spend a lot of time on a template creating the documents that you need for your grants. So I want you to think in terms of tools and time saving as well. And someone else talked about transitioning your volunteer treasurer from year to year. That is a challenge because if you don't have a system in place and process and protocols in place, it is a challenging transition. And I would encourage you, just based on my experience, that you have certain minimum qualifications for the treasurer. That they've done this work before. It doesn't have to be the accountant, but someone who really does understand a little bit about it. It's just not the person who stepped up. Because I've been in organizations where someone was treasurer. I am in a lot of nonprofit organizations, or have been throughout the years. And the treasurer didn't understand and everything got messed up. And then when you go to apply for a grant, you're not ready. You're not prepared. Or you have to submit that final report and you don't have the documents in place. So there's a couple things there with that I think is really important. And it goes back to, what does your organization stand for? So let's go to financial transparency. We talked a little bit yesterday in our run through about being careful what you apply for, because I know most nonprofit organizations are sure, there's never enough people to do the work. So what is this grant asking you to do? What percentage of it is your budget? Is it worth it for this project? Someone else put in the chat, how do we get someone to pay for administrative staff? Because typically grants won't do that. They pay for the program, right? They'll pay for certain things, that they'll pay for the artists to come. They may pay for their rent, but they're not going to pay for your staff to organize the thing and get it all together. I mean, it just depends what you're doing. And that's typically, we're going to touch on this a little bit. What do you do for, let's see, we've got directors, EDs. What do you typically do with, yes, QuickBooks with budgeting is around $85 a month. You're correct. And I think the thing that I like people to think about is I can only do, so, let's say that's $800. It's going to be a little bit more. I can't, 80 times 12 is what, $960. I can do the math in my head with that. So but for $1,000, is it worth it to have that? How much staff time does that save? And literally, those are the decisions that you have to make. How much staff time does it take to run a fundraiser that you might only earn $2,000? I don't know, but what I would encourage you to do is think about it. So this is more being curious about the money, being curious about where you want to go. And I'll share a story about setting up the proper protocols, because that goes with this as well. That means when you're a small organization and you're doing different events, I used to be a banker, in one of my lives. And what I do know is this: our job as board members or as EDs or as treasurers is to never put someone in a situation where they could be accused of stealing money. So what does that look like for your organization? How do you manage all of this? Because grants want you to be transparent too. How's the money flow? Who signs on what? Do we have one signature up to a certain amount? And all those things do matter. And I know it's a little bit out of the scope, but what I know is when I was in banking, I had to call in the FBI. And I promise you, that is not something you ever want to have to do, because we didn't have the correct protocols in place. And so it's one of those things that, really, really matters. And Jerica just let me know that she has budget templates and financial tracking templates available for organizations under $50,000. Feel free to email her. And QuickBooks can be optimized for nonprofit needs in specific instances. If you're managing a bunch of grants, so I'll give you an example of the one with budgets. The one with the budget amount that's $85 a month also has the ability to do different classes. So let's say you're managing 5 different grants. I mean, I've done all this, so I know kind of what a pain it is. And oh, wait, we have this big Excel worksheet and we kind of allocate this salary to this and this and this. If you have QuickBooks, and it's the one I think that's $85. It also has classes. You can label each grant a certain class. And then when you're allocating salaries, you can separate it through the grants. So then you can run a report on each one of those classes. This is a tool, and I realize we're getting in the weeds, but I'm all about giving people tools that'll make their job easier and not frustrating. And if you get your QuickBooks set up correctly, or any financial system set up correctly, it makes life so much easier instead of reinventing the wheel. And that's when the transition is easy as well, to move people through. And I think that's really key, critical. And I'm trying to, let's talk about capital fundraising. Jerica, you can pop in anytime, but someone asked on here, what about capital fundraising? That's huge. That takes a whole nother lift for your organization. And remember when Jerica talked about that it's okay to make money? It's okay. Whatever maybe you have some fee for service events, so that's non-restricted money. You get sponsors for certain things. And maybe what you decide as an organization is being intentional about, we know we're going to start this capital fundraising project. So 10% of everything, 20% pick, is going to go over here to start the fund. And then we're going to build it. And maybe that start is going to help you hire a part-time person, because it will take that to start a campaign. Jerica, you want to pop in and kind of address some of the things we chatted about?
Sure. Maria, I really appreciate you addressing this question of capital fundraising, and that's really about increasing organizational resources, which goes back to this question of money for admin, which is like the classic bane of
Right.
trying to run an arts organization. Is nobody wants to give you money for admin because admin's not sexy. To get money for admin, you have to ask for it, right? You have to advocate for why it matters. And that means knowing how much it really costs to run your organization, right? Like as Marie says, there's never enough staff to do anything, right? So if what you want is to increase your capacity as an organization to have the staff that you need, you have to take a hard look at your numbers. You have to be unafraid and courageous, as Marie mentioned, right? About looking at that and asking those hard questions, saying, how much does it cost us? Even if it seems like a scary number, because without knowing that number, without being able to say, this is what it costs, you can't go back to funders and say, I need 15% of this program grant to go towards admin. Otherwise, I can't run this program, right? Keep thinking about what are the hidden costs, right? As Marie says, like, what about grants that have hidden costs? fundraising campaigns, gala events, what are the hidden costs? What does it cost to run a Kickstarter, right? Seems like free money, but maybe at the end of the day, the amount that you spend on updating those videos and providing those perks is going to really actually lead you down a road where you're spending tons of staff time for little money. Thinking about all the places where you can draw money in that supports just everyday operations like keeping the lights on, and get excited about saying, all we want to do is keep the lights on, because if we pay our rent, pay for our insurance, pay for our payroll fees, we can do the things that you want us to do to make our communities thrive. If you're not willing to pay for admin staff, you don't get to have arts.
Right. And, you know, thank you for reminding me. She's getting me fired up again. They saw me fired up yesterday, so I knew that was her thing. I think the key thing too is when you apply for a grant, and Jerica alluded to it, make sure that grant is the right fit for your organization and your values and what you want to do. All grants are not equal. What does the fine print say in what you have to report back to them? Is it more work than it's worth? And oh, wait, they want you to do this, but they don't want you to pay for admin. Hello, it doesn't come out of thin air. And I will share an example with you. I ran a huge domestic violence shelter in California. Our budget was, you know, I don't remember at the time because it was a minute ago, and I'm going to say $3 to $4 million. We got $19,000 from a fairly significant organization in the community. They wanted us to go out when they were doing their campaign because we were the, I'm going to say, quote unquote, sweethearts of the community. And they wanted us to do all this reporting and all this stuff, and they didn't want us to pay for admin. And finally I said, you know what? We don't need your $19,000. You're not paying us enough. Because I calculated the staff time and the time it took away from the services that we needed to provide. And they went, what? Because no one ever took that stand. I said, look, we appreciate this. However, what you're requiring is costing us more money than what you're giving us, and it's not sustainable for this organization. So unless you can give us more to cover what we need to do to fill the requirements of the grant, because it was like, you're going to get $19,000, but you have to do, you know, 60 presentations and da, da, da. And it was, you know, over and beyond. I was like, no, we're not doing it. And I guess what I want to say to you is, once you know your numbers and you really know them, and I could prove it to them, like, no, this takes away from direct services. We're here to serve our community, create change, make an impact. And we can't do it without the money that you can provide. And so it was a great resource. We did end up getting more money, actually. And, but what my point is that everyone is nervous about numbers. Even people who run businesses, they're nervous about numbers. Find help, get comfortable with it. If you have a good system in place, and I am going to make a little caveat here because we've seen this happen. Jerica talked about QuickBooks Desktop. I'd highly recommend you use online, because if you switch from desktop to online, the transition is brutal.
Oh, brutal. Truly brutal.
So especially if you have volunteer treasurers and then they got to come into your space, it's a lot easier online because you can have a couple different access codes. It just works a little bit easier, because I've recently had several businesses do the transition, and it's never pretty, and it takes time away from what you're really ready to do. Just a little tidbit there. And yeah. What other questions do you have though? These are really, you can tell we're very passionate about it. You can be successful when you have passion for your story, and your numbers tell your story. Your numbers speak truth. If you're telling a story to a funder and your numbers look differently, and I can guarantee you, if I'm on the panel, I'm going to be asking hard questions. So what we're wanting you to do is be curious now, so that you can answer any question with confidence and excitement about what that looks like.
Thank you, Marie. That's perfect timing because it is the time for our Q&A session with you both. So just as a reminder for those that are here participating today, pop those questions in that chat and I will read them out to Marie and Jerica. If you would like to verbally ask your question to them yourself, if you use the raised hand icon, I'll keep an eye on that participant list. If you have your hand raised, I will call on you and you can come off of mute on camera and ask your question if we do have time for those verbal questions. You can find that raised icon down at the bottom Zoom controls. It should say reactions. And if you hover over that, you'll see the raised icon. Another option is if you have the ellipsis, those three little dots, and it might say more. If you click on that and then click on reactions, you'll be able to see that raised hand icon. I do have a question for Marie, though, myself, because I know with the Small Business Development Center, there's a lot of different resources that are available, and sometimes for a very reasonable fee, sometimes even for free. So I would love to hear about, are there any resources that the Small Business Development Center offers, especially to nonprofits?
Typically, I'll be candid, we are funded to serve for-profit businesses. That's that. However, anyone can take any of our trainings and they're typically no cost or low cost. In fact, we're doing a series called Financial Literacy Workshops. Oh man, I've got a guy here, FedEx, who of course wants a signature. I am in the middle of a Zoom. Hey, give me, oh, thanks.
I can speak to some additional resources.
Yeah,
sure.
Yeah.
Marie, while you do that, I'm happy to pass
do that. Go for it. Thank you.
Great. So as an arts finance consultant, I often offer workshops. I work directly with organizations, but something I can also recommend to all of you is two resources you may want to avail yourself of immediately. One is the Creative Capital grant, which is a national grant for artists. If you get on their mailing list, they have a fantastic roundup, sometimes I think it's monthly, of all kinds of training available, training workshops, offerings. A lot of them are related to finance. And what I would also recommend is get on the mailing list of whatever the funding organizations are in your community, whether that's at the regional level, the state level, or the national level, because it's very typical that the same workshops are being offered either or else from state to state. And funders like to share these resources, and it's really wonderful. It's often low cost or free workshops available for arts administrators and individual artists, right? So for example, I myself offer workshops through a number of my clients, which are service organizations. Those tend to be very low cost or free because the organization is paying for my time so that the community can take advantage, right? So don't hesitate to get on the mailing list of those major funders because they want you to succeed too. If they weren't invested in your success, they wouldn't be funders.
That's a great segue. And what I can say is if you go to the IdahoSBDC.org website, you're going to see we have 6 regions throughout the state, and there could be some things that are relevant for you. Let's say you need to build a website for your nonprofit. Well, we've got websites for entrepreneurs. It's not the skill set's the same. Or how to grow your business with Google. Another one, because you're going to share what you're doing. We also have I'm looking here, the financial literacy, understanding costs and selling price. Well, in your case, it's not going to be selling price, but it's going to be understanding the cost of providing that service. It looks a little different for a nonprofit, but there are ways that you can do it, because when someone says they want you to, and I remember when I was both on the board and executive director, a cost of providing a certain service costs so much. And if they're not willing to fund you for the whole thing, make sure that what you're agreeing to, you can provide it. Because the last thing you want to do with the funder is not perform or dig yourself into a deeper hole, if that makes any sense. So going back to what Allison said, certainly there are resources to help you up your financial literacy game, or at least be more confident. And I really think that's the key. It's just being able to answer the question and make sure that you are feeling like you are representing your organization in the best light and that your stories match.
That's
Because
right.
that's really the key, is
That is
telling
the
the
key.
story, is telling the story.
And a big piece of that is, right, if that honest storytelling, right, being clear on what your numbers are, is also about being clear about what you're worth,
Right.
right? And at the core of all of this is saying the work that you do is important, and you
Mhm.
should get the money that you need to do it without apologizing. You shouldn't have to beg and scrape for pennies. You shouldn't have to jump through hoops. And some funders, some people who give, will try and make you feel that that's what you have to do. And we don't have to validate them. We don't have to accept their funding. And at the end of the day, what matters is that you are willing to advocate for the work that you do as truly valuable. Knowing your numbers, using your finances is just about stating your case. It is about proving that you can do the work that you say that you're going to do and being able to put together an ask to your community, to donors, whoever it is, to your patrons, that says, we do amazing things. We can show you the dollar impact of what we do. People love to hear it. People want to help. But you have to be able to tell them how they're helping and what you need in order to make that ask. That's all that financials are, is the support for that at the end of the day.
It really truly is. And in one of my lives, I ran the Nampa Civic Center, and we had a performing arts series. So I've dabbled in the arts. And I will tell you the value when you're trying to recruit medical professionals to your community, that there is a vibrant arts program and experience in the community. Recruiters would come in and want to know. So, I want you to think outside the box as well. Be creative with who your partners can be. Economic development agencies, what kind of grants are, because guess what? You add vibrancy and excitement to the economy because it creates a thriving community where people want to live, work, and play. And those are the things so don't think just arts organizations, think big. And if you have your numbers correct, you really can create a synergy about the space that you're in and why it's critically important and why it matters. Because we all know, I do know this, that arts organizations, arts in a community add to the livability factor, add to why people want to live there, and communities thrive. So I have literally asked people, how committed are you to a healthy, vibrant community? Because arts are important.
Ooh,
Just
that is
saying.
such a great way to wrap it all up, Marie. Thank you. Oh my gosh.
I
That
can't
is
believe that nobody has questions, by the way. So
I know. Well, I think a lot of we got some really great feedback and information from those top three things, because to me, I think those are a lot of the questions that folks come in with, especially when it comes to financial management. And I love that one of the things that we talked about, and when we got together preparing for this presentation today, was the idea that uh, your financial management, your tools, your reports, your statements, they are the teeth to your organization. They are the things that when you go and you say, I am worth this, I am worth it for you to invest in me and to, write this grant on my, give me this money on my behalf. It's the teeth that sinks into it that I thought was such a great visual for me, at least. Now, we hope that everybody that's joined us today learned some stuff, that they are feeling empowered, they're feeling curious, they're feeling excited about looking at their financials from a different perspective and looking at it as a way to tell that story, a way to advocate for your organization and the incredible work that you're doing. And as Jerica mentioned, and as Maria also kind of helped drive home, this knowledge is powerful. The way that you understand this, that empowerment is a really great tool to have. Now, while we're closing up, you should see a poll pop up in just a second on your computer screen. Please take a minute while I'm closing this all down for us today to answer the couple of questions so that we can plan these events for you based on your needs and wants for the future. We also shared the emails of Jerica and Marie in the chat. You are welcome to reach out to either one or both directly. And if one can't answer it, they have each other's contact info. They can refer you around as well. So really utilize them as a resource. They are fantastic and knowledgeable and obviously very passionate about this topic. And then finally, before we go, I am going to pop up just a quick, my poll is in the way. I can't pop it up. I'm going to share a screen with you that just outlines some of our upcoming webinars in this Arts Learning Lab series. So there's two that are coming up right in the next couple of months. So the first one is going to be about annual grants for organizations and for educational projects. These are 2 annual grants that are offered here at the Arts Idaho. And that webinar is going to be on Tuesday, December 5th from 12:30 to 1:30 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And the other one is when learners lead. And that is about learner-led education and how that nourishes intrinsic motivation in learners. And that will be hosted on Tuesday, January 6th, 2024, from 4 to 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. And you can find all this information on our website, arts.idaho.gov. I will take that stop sharing down so that we can get back to it. Fantastic.
I just want to reiterate what Allison said. Please get in touch with us, right? We are eager to support you, right? Like, we've packed a lot into an hour, but an hour is truly only a beginning. Please do not hesitate to follow up with us as individuals, right? Like, we are here to support you. Allison, we're so grateful to have been invited here. And I just want to, right, Arts Idaho is an incredible resource for you, as this workshop shows. And please take advantage of us and our knowledge as much as possible.
Absolutely.
I truly, yeah, thank you, Allison, for inviting me too. So appreciate it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Marie and Jerica. And thank you to everybody who is participated, who tuned in today for this. Again, it is going to be recorded and we will get that up on the website and on YouTube shortly. So feel free to sign up for our newsletter and follow us on social and you'll get all of those updates. But thank you again for joining us and we hope to engage with you again soon.